This is For Lack of Better Terms with Andrew and Jerry. We're in the band Nothing New. We have, I guess, started this band almost a year ago now, correct? Um,
Well, I think did we discuss it at that I Hate God show? And I
yeah.
still don't remember at the I Hate God show. Did we intend to meet each other there, or was it happenstance that?
It was happenstance. I might have messaged you if you were see if you were going. I just kind of assumed, being a fan of the band, that you would be there. Um, but when I got there, I mean, you can ask my wife. I was like looking for you because I just assumed you would be there,
Right. Yeah.
especially with that band. They've just kind of started heavily touring again, where they didn't for a while, and I've missed them a lot of times. They would have a show and it would get canceled, and situations of that. But at that show, it was at the Nick, and if you've ever been to the Nick in Birmingham, Alabama, there's like an outside area, and I was in a band, but me and Andrew have always talked about joining together and sort of starting a band together or playing in a band together or something of that extent.
Was that Death Card at that
Yeah,
time?
it was. And you'll hear about that band later. We're kind of going to go through, I guess, a little history of ourselves. I'm kind of going to start with the history of us so far and the reason that it's just the two of us and kind of how we do this. So we have music out. We have an EP. It's called Transcend. It's on every streaming service. Amazon, Spotify, iTunes. You can look it up. It's Nothing New, Transcend. We have 5 songs. We just got finished with our album, I guess, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how to even pronounce the word.
Crean. Cean. Crean.
Okay, because I looked it up and it was all like even in like a British, I think, pronunciation, it could be like Shaun of the Dead.
Oh,
it
really?
Can,
See, I didn't even...
it can be pronounced that way.
Maybe we should call it Sean.
I don't know.
I have a few good friends named Sean. Anyway, it has meaning for us. We'll unveil that later, because naming an album sucks. For the most part, it's trying to figure out. There are a lot of bands I'm sure that have the name before or right after. We had no idea with this one, just being honest. But anyway, me and Andrew here have, I guess, for lack of better terms, full-time jobs. Houses. I have a wife. He has a son. Sorry. We have responsibilities. Not that other bands don't, because there are plenty of bands out there who tour full-time and have families and wives and that thing.
And come home and have to work part-time jobs.
Exactly.
Fucking metal doesn't pay, unfortunately, like it should.
Exactly. We kind of made the decision, back when I was in another band and we were talking about this, to do this as a recording project. Let's just record some songs, put them up. We can, we use DistroKid, so we could, put it out there. People could hear it. If you like it, then it's yours. There it is. We're not ruling out the fact of that we might play some shows. We just thought maybe we got a couple albums under the belt before we really went through the headache of finding other members of a band, because that's another issue that we've had, is when going into starting a band, the thing that you don't see a lot of times with your favorite bands is how many members was in that band before they made it, before who they are, and for each of us, we've probably been in bands that had 15 members that, give or take, because this guy would quit, or there'd be an argument, or, the drummer slept with the bass player's girlfriend, or, just other shit that happened. And we just weren't about it anymore. Like that side of drama gets old quick. You know, we ain't the youngest guys in the world. You know, that kind of stuff. It just gets old. Also, speaking of that, usually when it comes to our age of guys, they usually play cover bands. I don't really want to do that either. I don't hate the idea of being in a cover band by any means. And I don't know how you feel on that, but
If you're gonna, I don't know, Casey Rosamond said, I don't know if I can mention his name. Maybe he won't hate me for this, but he told me an important thing. You know, if you're gonna go out there and do it, at least play fucking songs that you wrote. You know, and I think Henry Rollins put it in juxtaposition of that. Henry Rollins said something about when you're a touring band, you're basically a cover band, only that you play music that you wrote. And that's very true. So in a certain sense, yeah, I guess you are a cover band in a way, no matter what you do. But no, I wouldn't want to be in a band that all they do is covers and fucking drunk ass bar crowd pleasers. That's not for me.
And I don't know if it's 100% for me either. I have sort of where the name of the band came from was an idea for a cover band. The band NothingNew, you know, would have been a cover band of sort of like a revolving cast of musicians, sort of, and just play the songs that you like. You know, you go buy an album, you don't have to like the singles. You don't have to you could like the deep cuts, you know, play that. Just something that you really enjoy playing. I'd kind of sit on this name for probably 10 years. I said it to Andrew. He thought it was funny. And the idea was, you know, kind of funny. So we just decided to use it for this because really, who says that would ever have done that? You know, I mean, just being honest. But anyway, we are Nothing New. Like I said, we have an EP out. We just finished our album. You can visit us on Facebook. It's Nothing New Metal. We're on all streaming services. We have a YouTube page. We're videotaping this, but it's more of a podcast kind of setup. So I know that we're going to try to do podcast and video. And so that way we can sort of hit both. You know, if you want to watch us do this or if you want to listen to us.
Where do you listen to the podcast, and what will? How do you find it? I guess
since this is our first episode, I don't know. I haven't exactly found it. If you find us on Facebook, we'll sort of announce it at that point. We're recording these at my house. The other thing I need to point out is that I have cats. Eventually, you're probably going to see one because they like to be in the middle of everything.
They're going to steal the show.
Yeah. So, since you got an idea of kind of how we do this is the reason why we do it this way, and that we're not so opposed to doing shows. You know, I don't know how much that we could afford to tour, but, you know, if you're local to where we are, you know, eventually you may see us play out. But I know, at least through Andrew, he has a pretty deep history in playing in bands that played out a lot. I do, but I took large breaks in between. But anyway, for this episode, I was just going to kind of ask Andrew a few questions about his history and sort of let it be kind of about him. We've rambled a little bit of this explaining, but we can still kind of get it in.
Should we work in real quick how we write music?
We could probably do that for another. We could do a whole another episode on that one because that's pretty interesting too. Because it's completely different. I say it's interesting. It's interesting for me and him because I've never done it this way. You know, we've done it the organic way, I guess would be to put it. Sit in a room, at least for me, sit in a room with a bunch of people, write songs, and or I would sit in my jam room and work out songs, and then when everybody come together, sort of work out the kinks and make it into a song. And I'm pretty sure you've probably done this kind of the same thing.
Absolutely, and it's time consuming, and it's even as a vocalist, it's even more so because the music, the drum beats and the riffs and all that has to be written prior to you putting, because the vocals really are the last thing that are done. So you're waiting. There's even more time spent bored in the practice space and frustrated, but it's just the nature of the beast.
And we do this completely differently. It's sort of not, but it sort of is. So I guess we could do a whole kind of an episode on that. And I could sort of probably as we record this kind of show. It's really not rocket science, but we could do another episode on that one.
I'm writing this down. Because like in the practice space, when hey, what was that fucking riff we were playing last week? It was fucking awesome. Shit, nobody can fucking remember it.
Yeah,
and that's another aspect of what's frustrating about writing live music or writing music in a practice space.
So while you're writing that down, tell me what got you into music. What was the original,
like playing music, I assume.
Well, listening to music. I mean, realistically, at first we're all music fans. That's what brings us to doing music, brings us to me to picking up a guitar, things of that nature. What got you sort of into music?
That's weird that you say that. The first song that I remember liking as a kid was it was that Joan Jett song with a
Is it I
Saw
love,
You Standing There by the Record Machine.
I love rock and roll.
I love rock and roll. That's the first song I remember liking as a kid. So I guess, which Joan Jett's an awesome entertainer, but not heavy metal, not metal by any means. But I guess I had that that rock gene or bug or whatever, and then just whatever '80s music was on the radio, and my parents listened to. Or more so, my dad listened to, like 50s and 60s era music, pop or rock music. So that, and then, as the 80s, as the 80s did, all the hair bands and the glam bands came in, and of course that pulled me in because it was a little more hard edged. And then I don't know what do you want to know? Like,
I mean, you can go for all of it, man. I mean,
or how, like, I don't know if you were talking more about how I got into like actually playing music, or like how I got into heavy metal.
Really, I mean, yeah. Tell me how you got into heavy metal, and then tell me how you got into play. After tell me how you got into.
Well, you're Warrant and Poison and Whitesnake and all those bands were happening and stuff, and then Guns N' Roses happened, and they had a kind of a dirtier, more rock and roll.
Yeah,
I know you're the enormous Motley Crue fan, but Motley Crue never really pulled me in, and they had a more of a dirty kind of rock, almost even a little punk, I guess, punk influence in a way.
Yeah,
but I was always I guess as you grow up and get older, you always look for heavier, darker, and then I just and Justice for All came out by Metallica.
Oh yeah,
and that took me down that listening to the heavier and the thrash and stuff like that, and then Pantera. I found Vulgar Display of Power. It came out. Megadeth Symphony. I think on the same day I bought. What was it? Countdown to Extinction, Megadeth.
Mm-hmm.
Vulgar Display of Power and Helmet's Meantime.
Oh, I love that Helmet record.
I'd saved up my money from working that summer and bought all those on cassette, all those in one day.
Wow.
And so and then of course, see who told you about the cats?
Yeah.
As it gets heavier and darker. I heard an interview with Hank the Third, where if you're just talking about as you older, you're always searching for that next more heavy, extreme thing. So you could find death metal and black metal and all kinds of stuff. So that's where it went.
So, what led from that to you playing in a band?
Coming out of not long after high school, I was actually going to Gadsden State here in college, and I had a friend of mine. He was Brian Taylor, absolute best friend through school, which he was like, and that's another, Smashing Pumpkins is huge. Like that was we both like Smashing Pumpkins. He didn't really like metal, but he liked Pantera.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know, just there's something about Pantera that kind of crosses the genre boundaries, I guess. But he wanted to start a band. There was this guy out of Piedmont, Jared Hooper, but we called him Skolnick, and he was a drummer guy. And then a guy was a local tattoo artist. Kind of a sad story with him. That may be another episode to talk about. Kenneth Neuer.
Did they call him Elvis?
They called him Elvis. Yeah,
okay.
That's maybe
I met him a couple of times, but.
We started a band called Zero, which did a few like Smashing Pumpkins. We did Ruby Soho.
Oh wow! Did you sing?
Yeah, sort of ish.
Nice.
Ruby Soho, terribly. I sang terribly. We only did one show. It was like a talent show at a high school or something because Skolnick was still in high school.
Nice.
And it never went much further than that. But and Brian was just like, hey man, I was gonna do this music, and I was like, I want you to be in the band. I was like, I don't know, what the hell am I going to do? He said, well, sing, do the vocals. And I guess, I bought a little combo amp and a shitty VTech microphone and went from there. Later, I got in a band called Unrelent, which was just pretty straight on heavy metal. And then later, I got involved with Trocar. They're still I think some of them have moved on to what's it called now Hatred in Thy Name.
Yeah.
Those guys, I was kind of off and on in Trocar. I didn't do many shows with them. Then another band, I moved on to another band called Mouthful of Fist. It was pretty straight on metal, but a little more complicated. The music itself was a little more complicated than Unrelent was. Trocar was straight on just death metal, and I think that was kind of they always wanted me to do. I always try to mix death metal and black metal and just, I guess you call it like a hardcore vocal timbers, and use them all within the music. And they always wanted me to they just wanted me to do the death metal guttural vocals all the time, and they didn't hate me for it or anything like that, but that's always what they wanted. And then later went on to Head Not Found. That was probably the biggest, well, not biggest, but got the most shows, most notoriety, had more T-shirts and shit like that, and probably until now, probably the biggest thing I had done. In a little while, I worked into with Napalm Nathan and Zach Reinhardt. I was in they were called Black Ink for a Black Letter.
Yeah.
And then as I was sort of in the band, they changed it to We Must Build.
Yeah.
And I did that. I don't know, you might have actually been there, that punk rock and metal festival that they did out on the base.
We a band that I was in actually played that show also.
Oh, okay.
And then I want to say you guys did a show at Angel Heart that we were on too. Was there like some tsunami festival or Hurricane Katrina festival or something like that? Did y'all play? Or they may have played. You might not have been with them because they were a band. There was just the two of those guys, and they did some shows, and then they got you to come do the vocals.
Well, yeah, I was in Head Not Found at the time, so it was kind of like a little side thing I was doing. So, and if the best of my recollection, we only did that one show. And I didn't know. They were like, "Hey, man, here's the CD," and they didn't have any lyrics or anything. It was just you just had to hit the screams at the right time. So it was just, we had never practiced together, nothing. We just got up on stage and just did it, which was really
nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it was strange. And then recently I did the death metal project with Tim Smith, who's in Forever Broken, which ties into the
last band
the death card that we were just talking about of your band, and then of course Nothing New now. Yeah.
And speaking of the Forever Broken, I've known those guys for probably 20 plus years actually. So Scott's brother. We used to call him Metal Mike. I did a radio show when I was in college, and he used to call it was on Tuesday night. He would call every Tuesday night, and he kind of introduced me to him because I played guitar and Scott played guitar, and just kind of how we knew each other. But both of us had tried out for a band called what was
Divine Black and Path.
There you go. Yeah, I tried out for Divine Black and Path because I was also friends with, and I'm drawing a blank on his name. Who is the singer of Divine Black and Path?
John Kay.
Yeah, so John Kay, we were friends. My friend Jules worked at his tattoo shop. We were all buddies, and that's the downfall of me, is that I'm horrible with names. Like, I can remember faces. If you walk up to me, I'll completely remember who you are, but I'm never going to remember your name. I don't know why. Unless I'm somebody that I speak to every day, and some people with that, I can remember their names greatly, but some people I can't. Anyway, so you wrote a few books too. Like,
yes, that nobody reads.
Well, I read one. I really didn't know that I knew you'd wrote 2, but you wrote 4, right?
Yeah, well, there's a couple I haven't published. It was like, I've got some short stories and a novel that's done, but I don't know. I just can't get my shit together to get it put out there for some reason.
So tell me the books that are where people could go buy, because I know you can hunt for it on Amazon.
Yeah, if they're still on the internet, or The Truth Behind the Eyes, that was like not to plug Ozzy or anything, but like a Diary of a Madman kind of thing. I thought in terms of the movie Seven.
Yeah.
When they actually found the killer's apartment he was living in, he had all these journals that he was writing in, like just whatever a serial killer would talk about in a journal.
Yeah.
That was kind of the idea behind it. And then I did Letters from Atlanta, which was I guess you call it a novella, or a short novel. I guess shorter than a novel, but longer than a short story. It's about I guess presupposing that a poet could actually make money as a poet in his lifetime, maybe like maybe like a Bukowski or a Kerouac kind of guy that just kind of gets sick of everything and he sells everything he owns and goes to England to kill himself, to just live, do a bucket list of things and then commit suicide.
Okay.
And then Jesus in Hell, Jesus in Hell was more, I guess you call it a chapbook. I think that's the term, is you kind of just print poetry as cheaply, or whatever, literature it is, as cheaply as possible, and try to sell it. And that's kind of what I did with that, and sold it to whoever was, God bless you wherever you are, that I conned you into buying a copy of that, and I used that money to fund the Journal of a Fool. Now, Jesus in Hell you can't buy because I published it on my own, but that funding, because again, this is all self-published, and it's nothing special. It's not like I have,